Without the power of God, behind everything I do, I really am completely inadequate.
I'm helping the culture. These guys are part of us as well. You know, these are guys of our cousin. I'm helping the culture. I'm pushing the culture forward in another way.
Hey, black child, be what you can be, learn what you must learn, do what you can do, and tomorrow.
What do you do after you read? What do you do after you know all, right? And you can say that you're truly conscious. How are you putting what you know into action?
Hey. I am your host, Jasmine Gates, and this is the New Black History Makers Show. We are live at the Good News Network. I'm excited to be here with Sasha and Kara.
Hi.
Yes, if you were watching a few months ago, I don't even remember what month it was, but I think it was episode 13. We're on episode 26. So, wow, 13 episodes later.
Wow.
We talked about church hurt and we detailed our experiences in the church, just as people that all three of us have spent our whole lives essentially in the church and are still here. So we were able to kind of just like detail it and shed light on the things that we felt. But how are y'all doing? How are y'all feeling? Who wants to?
That felt like a while ago. 13 episodes.
Yeah,
It
so
was-
13 weeks. Yep.
Yeah, it was a while ago. So much has happened since then.
Yeah.
Great things I'll get into later. But yeah, it's amazing what can happen in a short time frame.
Yeah. But yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. How about you?
I'm doing well. I think even from the conversation we've had on that episode till now, a lot has happened in the church and
Yeah.
experience in church and things like that. So it does feel like it was a while ago.
It was.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think like both of you guys said, different spaces and then just having more to be able to add to that conversation, right? Not necessarily saying like, oh, you know, that more hurt has taken place, right? But I think
not hurt.
right.
No, not hurt.
No, definitely. It's not
Growth.
negative. A lot
Yeah.
of growth.
Yeah.
A lot of great feedback.
Yeah.
And then ways. I think there's a lot of healing and acknowledgement.
Yes.
Mhm.
So if you can acknowledge where you come from, I go to therapy. I believe in therapy. I love therapy.
Yeah.
And one of the things my therapist says is if you can acknowledge something and you tell it enough, like you get to the place where you heal from it.
Mm.
And you talk about it in a different way. You
Mhm.
come at it from a different standpoint.
Story
which is-
changes a little
Yes,
bit. How you
you
see
don't
it
sound
different.
hurt.
Yeah.
You know, you speak from a healed place
Yeah.
for sure.
Right. So yeah, and I think that's the goal, or not that I think it is, that is the goal with like these conversations. It's where clearly we still go to church, right? And there's a lot of people that are probably having these conversations that are like, I would never set foot, or you know, their intention is to never set foot in the church. But ours is, I mean, we all go to church every Sunday, you know, attend, I'm sure, at least one extra service where it be a Bible study or some type of group right, something, you know. So we church and do whatever, but still have these experiences. And I think in the last episode we went through like our experiences of what that initial hurt maybe was or what it looked like in the church. So it's definitely grown. But before we get into that conversation, we can do the introductions again. So if you want to just let people know like who you guys are, what you guys do, for those that did not catch it the last time. Anybody can. Sasha, you want to?
I'm Sasha PELLUM. I am a real estate agent, specializing in luxury real estate, but have a heart for first-time home buyers and creating generational wealth through the power of homeownership. So if you're looking to invest, need a refi, want to buy a house, want to sell a property, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to help.
Yes.
All right. So I'm Kara. And the last time you all sat down with me, it was Kara Craig. I've had a name change since then. My bad. And it's Kara Gates. And I have a show, Kara Gates Show. And on the show, I talk about different topics that are of interest to me. I am an executive support specialist in various industries. And I work like in the church. I'm also a support specialist. So I do a lot of different things. I don't like to say like, oh, I do one specific thing, but I think the main thing I like to focus on is the show and the gems that are dropped throughout the shows.
Yeah.
I have a great time doing that. That's my passion,
Right.
speaking, helping people through my experiences.
Yeah. And then your last episode, you talked about like not judging a book by its cover. And I think that's, I think that's essentially as those of us that have experienced negative stuff in the church, but have still decided to keep ourselves there, that also plays a part there, like that, not judging a book, right? Not judging the church by what people have pushed, this narrative of like, oh, the church is going to steal your money or the church is going to do whatever, and it's like, there are aspects or people in the church that will, right? But I think the church as a whole and what the God intended for the church to be, is much bigger and a lot different than the cover, I guess you can say, that we've been given by society. So yeah, it's an interesting,
And the cover we
interesting
could
thing.
have walked away with if we hadn't dove like into our hurt and why we
Mhm.
felt the way that we felt and getting serious about that healing.
Yeah. And I think healing is important too. I think we talked about like, we've talked a lot offline about like deliverance, but um that healing like in your mind is a real thing. And I feel like we talk about it like, oh, God's a healer, but like, oh, of cancer, or of like your body or your physical needs or whatever. But it's like, no, a lot of us need like this spiritual, emotional healing, or
And
the healing
mental,
mentally. Yeah.
for sure.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. But yeah, so y'all know, question after how are you doing? There's just some random question that I pull up. So for this week it is, what's the biggest lesson that you learned this week?
This week alone.
Grace. I think grace has been a big thing just
Mm,
for me, period. I've talked to you about it a little bit in spaces outside of the church, showing grace to people who don't think like me or that don't believe as I believe. Showing grace there and bridging the gap to still communicate, to still see the need, to still try to meet the need.
right. And I think it's interesting too because you had mentioned, I think, the Safe People book. And I think
Great book.
oftentimes we, as who we are, right, we can also look at ourselves as the victim, but then also like we are, and we've talked about it because we come from a very similar background. I mean, essentially, we come from like we're family. Her last name, my last name. But our grandfathers are brothers. If you didn't catch the last episode, and then we have this Kojic, around. So we have a very different understanding of the world, right? So the same way the church could have been towards us, and we put that on as a victim, we can be that way towards, other people. And that was something that I thought about when when I watched it back and you had mentioned the Safe People, is like, being mindful of that. Like, okay, I can call out what the old church or what the church is doing now, but like, how am I bringing that into someone else's life and them feeling like they need to go on the show and talk about the way that I maybe do not create a safe space for them, So it's an interesting thing, but it's like I try to always be mindful, like, okay, if I'm the victim, then maybe I'm also victimizing somebody else. And how can I be different? But I think it's important that we do that now and not when we're 50, right? But we're able to do that now so that, like, let's say my little brothers, or if we have any like younger siblings or whatever around us, we're like, okay, well, I know I may have messed up then, but I'm going to fix it now instead of having to have this tough conversation in 20 years about the 30 years worth of things that I've hurt you, over. So I think that's a, important.
And keeping in the mindset, is it effective? Am I effective? As I'm talking to this individual, am I getting through? Are we having a conversation or are we arguing? Are we debating? And that's been really big for me.
Yeah. Biggest lesson
This week, I have to in this season of my life, I have to really think twice about every single move I make, about the things that I say, about the way that I approach everything. So I think my biggest lesson is learning how to slow down and recognizing like whatever decision I make, it needs to be a well thought out decision. I keep hitting this thing like
I know it's like,
like,
in a weird
like boom, like I don't mean to
Don't
hit
fix
it.
yeah.
But it's just learning to take my time and don't make quick hasty decisions and really count the costs of everything I'm doing. That's been my biggest lesson this week.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we're all in our careers, right? All doing something with business, and then we all are boldly, I think, professing that we love God, we love Jesus,
sure.
you know. So, I think moving into that, we have to like be calculated with what we're doing, you know, because it's like you don't want to, you know, we ain't out here having a.
Man.
Well, I guess the hot girl summer is a little more permissible, right? But the city girl, we ain't out here being city
No.
girls, you know. But you know, we have to be mindful of that, you know, even in our like young age. It's like something to be mindful of. Not necessarily having to cut ourselves into the cookie cutter women that raised us, right? But then still honoring what they taught us, but moving in a way that still honors who we are, like as individuals. So it's an interesting life.
Honestly, my next episode is about this. And Jasmine knows. Like, I'm really excited about it. I'm not going to tell you what it is today because today we're focusing on church hurt.
Yeah.
But when I say it's gonna blow the roof, it's gonna blow the roof because it's that interesting perspective of having the background that I have, but also knowing that like I'm an individual and I have made a name for myself in other areas and other facets of life. So it's like, okay, how do I merge, you know, what I learned out there with my upbringing, and then how do I keep it all congruent, keep it all relevant, and it can coexist together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
To commingle.
Yeah, like just the episode is going to be amazing the way I do it. You just got to wait for it.
Yeah,
I'm
so we'll
excited.
definitely tag and stuff and make sure people know about it. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and even this, just the fact of us being mindful enough to have the conversations, right? Because there's so many people who are not considering how their life decisions are affecting other people
and their behaviors.
Yeah, and not affecting people that they care about, affecting people and the way that they will see God. And I think that's the big thing too. Like, I don't. Yes, okay. Caring about how it affects my family, of course, but like I'm already moving in a way, right, where things are not going to affect that. But then thinking in a higher level of like, okay, I don't want to do this in front of you, or I don't want to say this in front of you, or say whatever, because you may look at God differently. And there's a lot of people, right? And there's a lot of people who do not have that conviction. They just move and they do what they do, and it's like it's fine. But I think, you know, you brought it up, and I know, and I mean, me personally, Jazz, I talk to you guys. We have conversations about church stuff, you know, or about just our upbringing and how things are or whatever. So I know that it's something that is definitely on all three of our minds, and its intention, you know, like just to.
I mean, as even in church, we're believers, we can go see how people move, and
Yeah.
it has growing up affected our perspective of God. So to imagine how that would be for an unbeliever or somebody who's not church, who doesn't know how to search a scripture for themselves or have any foundation, it's like we can be leading them completely the opposite way than what we say out of our mouth, you know.
My mom, she used to say sometimes you're the only Bible that anyone will read.
Yeah.
Your behavior, it should be indicative of the word. Like you should be following it in that way.
Right.
And I didn't get it until now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important. And then also like being able to, I mean, I say duality, like live in duality, but I guess it's just like a harmony, right? Of figuring out, like you said, my identity and who I am can exist in the church, and then who I am in the church can exist outside of the church.
Yes.
And that's, you know, the important thing. Like I think, well, I'm not even gonna mention that because that's gonna take some more thought. But yeah, so and that's the important thing. But let's talk a little bit about like the mental aspect. I don't know if I mentioned it on the show, and I don't think that I mentioned it in the last episode, but I know I was talking to another cousin. So we actually grew up in the same church. So it was like we grew up like sisters, and there's only two of us females on the older side of like the cousins and stuff. And we recently were having a conversation about anxiety. And I was like, I feel like if you grew up in the kind of church that we grew up in, it will be very difficult for you as an adult not to have anxiety, because they told you had to wear skirts. They told you if you sat in the back, it was a problem, or you must have been sinning or something. Or even to communion, like, yeah. So that was the thing. Like, okay, don't sit here, don't do this, or we have to wear this, or you need to be covered up, or don't wear hoop earrings, or if you're not standing up during praise and worship, then you must not be like in tune with God. So you have all these things.
These things are still things that
people are thinking, and not everybody is experiencing them. I think when you're close knit to the people that are around or running the church, that's when you experience them. But it brought forth a lot of anxiety. And now I'm going into spaces where it's like, oh, they must be mindful of that. And then it's like, well, nobody is looking at you saying you're going to hell, but the people in the church.
That's that Koji stuff.
But nobody is doing that. So that was something that, like, I know now that I experience certain anxieties in certain spaces, and I'm constantly like, oh, they're going to trip because of that, because of the way that I was brought up in church. And of course, it's not the only thing that I got, but I'm like, that plays a part. And I just don't think any of us that grew up I know for a fact, for those of us that grew up, like, we all have this experience.
It's a complex.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
I'm like, that came from being in church every Sunday, every Tuesday, every Friday, whenever we was there. It's something to be noted.
I'm fighting the complex. I fight the complex. Like, the back, don't sit at the back. I used to be at the front. I sit at the back now. And I like it back there. Don't mind me. I'm back here, and I will praise and worship from the back. I don't mind, but like,
I grew up like Jazz in a Kojic church, but a small church, and my grandmother trips now if I wear pants to church, and I do wear pants to church. I'm very grateful that my leaders don't give me that guilt or that condemning, but I also know that because I am in an organization that feels it is appropriate to wear dresses. So if I'm serving in ministry, I will abide, right? Because I feel it's right. Now, I don't know. I think I told this last time. I left the church for about 10 years. So in coming back, a part of me not wearing dresses, some said it was rebellion. Some said it was freedom.
They love to say it's rebellion. Everything is rebellion when you don't listen to what they think is like. When you're not doing exactly what they think you should be doing, it's it's a rebellious spirit.
Right. And but a piece of it was, to be honest, a piece of it was like, no, my soul. What about my soul? Because that was my thing. Like, you're more concerned with what I have on than my soul. And I was in a season where my soul was sick.
Yeah.
So to come to a ministry where they cared about my soul, and I had pants on, I wore dresses, it doesn't matter. It's like they have consistently been concerned, and that made the difference. And that makes you want to abide by whatever your organization is, whatever organization you're a part of, by what they deem appropriate. Because I realized that all this stuff ain't all bad.
Yeah.
It's not all bad.
It's not all bad.
So like the way that they taught us. So I mean, because we grew up essentially where the nails and hoop earrings, pants, makeup, makeup is lipstick. So
piercings,
all of that,
tattoos.
all of that was deemed like, oh, you were not sanctified if this is what you had.
We ghetto Christians. We gonna bless them.
That's what they told us too.
Yeah, that's exactly what
it's all right.
They Baptists.
It's all right. I literally,
we love Baptists.
Like, literally, I was 28 years old when I realized that Kojic people think that Baptists are the ghetto Christians.
Not ghetto. Wait, we don't think they ghetto.
Y'all do. I was having a conversation with one of my brother preacher friends, and he said he's dating this girl, and he loves this girl. I'm like, all right, bro, I'm happy for you. Like, trying to give him pointers, do this, do that, and he's like, yeah, she's Kojic. I'm like, what's that mean? I'm like, I don't get it. He's like, yeah, they think in their denomination they think that we're ghetto. I said, they do. I did not know.
We don't think that. We don't think that the Baptist is ghetto.
We the ghetto Christians.
We don't think that. But
I mean, they said it in so many words.
But we were raised. They told us that
I'm all right
Baptists.
I mean, and that's essentially the reason why Kara and I did not really grow up together, because my grandmother, we detailed it in the last episode.
My grandparents' house was not what they were doing.
But my grandfather, our grandfathers are brothers. My grandfather married a Kojic. My grandmother was Kojic, and she come from a Kojic lineage. And she brought him over and said that we don't do what they do.
We don't drink. We don't smoke.
Right.
Oh, we like nobody in the family smoked.
Well, that's what we were. This is not true, but this is what they. This is how this is what we were. Yeah, they was smoking in the parking lot. They was drinking.
We were not. So just so you know, the church that I grew up at, there was no smoking in the parking lot. There was no drinking in the parking lot.
But you know what's crazy?
They might throw hands.
I mean, I think that's every church. Every black church. My grandmother's pastor, when she was Baptist, he smoked until the day he died.
Wow.
And that's one reason how she ended up at a Kojic church, because her whole thing was, you can't preach to me the power and not house the power. But I don't believe Baptists are sinners are ghetto.
But essentially, like, that's what we were taught. And it's really,
and it brought a lot of division.
Yeah. And you can see it, literally that's our family, where that's what it was. And that's why there's some of us that, grew up on this side. Like, we had to connect as adults, because of this Kojic and Baptist little beef that was going on.
Little Biggie and Tupac.
I didn't even know that it was a beef. I had no clue. Like,
and I think what it maybe was is that I don't necessarily know, because Kojic, that we view ourselves as this like super, super sanctified, whatever standard. So they would just speak about other denominations that weren't upholding it. I don't have the experience to say like a Baptist. Though. Yeah, because you just walk around thinking that
you're superior.
Anybody says I go to a Baptist church, you're like, oh, you ain't right.
Yeah, oh, you ain't saved.
It's a complex.
8 years old, telling people that the Baptist preachers ain't saved.
Literally. And like, I have friends. I grew up in a very small town, so like my friends I went to school with, we went to school from preschool to high school and graduated with, but we didn't go to church together. So come Sundays, it was like, oh no, y'all not
with us.
Y'all not right. And then I grew up and realized, y'all, this is crazy. Heaven ain't Kojic. And that was a trip for me, because that's how
I want y'all to tune into this next episode, okay? I'm about to get into this. Today we're talking about church hurt.
But in our growing up, I realized that I had to unlearn a lot of things mentally. I had to reprogram how I looked at people and how I treat people and how I viewed myself coming up in this denomination. I mean, it's a wonderful denomination. I love Church of God in Christ, but there was pride that I had to learn that, okay, that's not right. Just as you love him, they love him. And
it looks different for some people.
It does. And as a body, we shouldn't be that separated, right? we shouldn't have these notions of Baptist or apostolic or anything. Like, we should be able to come together and actually worship. And I had like, and that was part of my therapy. Like, seriously, like, wow. I had to understand that, first off, the church ain't all bad. I can't hold what a few people did to everybody, because just as in the world, we come across crooks and robbers and murderers and everything else, we cannot expect anything different in the church. It's a lot of broken people hiding under titles as their identity. So when they get that title, they no longer work on self. They just keep building that identity, that title. And that hurts people, because when you don't work on you just bleed on people.
You're ministering wounded.
Yeah, and you bleeding all over us. So I had anxiety. I dealt with some depression from the church, of guilt of not walking in my calling and not like, we were taught fear. We weren't taught a lot of love. I had to learn God's love somewhat on my own as coming back to him. Now, it's don't get me wrong, if you're in the right space, it's taught. But a lot of older preachers taught us how to love through fear. And that's something I had to really, really work on.
Yeah. The fear thing is a big, I guess, tactic. I mean, I think now a lot of these, bigger churches, they're moving away from fear, but it's also into the prosperity, and it's not really into life change. Right. But it's, for me, I think the other side of the fear is the freedom. And that's something that I speak to often. It's just like the freedom in God, right? And I think we were taught like, oh, keep your legs closed. And it was like, as if they were trying to strip us of fun, but they just never told us about being a woman and keeping yourself and how much of a beautiful journey that can be, right? It was just, if you go over there, you hoe and whatever. It was just like, I just don't want to be a hoe, you know, like that's it.
Patriarchal to me.
Right. It's like nobody ever really talked just about what that is and what.
And they never shared their stories either.
Yeah, because some of them wasn't keeping their legs closed. They had nothing to tell us. So they was just telling us that the Bible said do not fornicate, but they didn't know how beautiful the freedom is when you're not, and that you don't have to yell at somebody or make someone scared of sleeping with a man when you can tell them about the good side of not sleeping with just any man that they come across. And that was something in the church that I never heard. I didn't hear the woman speaking about being in their 20s and being single and them enjoying it. Like, I'm gonna tell you, I'm enjoying my singleness. But I didn't hear that. I just heard you're not supposed to fornicate and you need to get married. Yeah. And we're about to go to a commercial in a little bit, but that was just something that we need to speak to the freedom side of it and not the ramifications if you fall short. That was, I think, where a lot of the people went wrong. And then you had us with, you know, I mean, my God, the church that I was in, I was a little innocent then. My parents didn't let me do nothing. And, you know, I turned 18, turned up. But when we was in the church, because a lot of these parents were working and stuff, a lot of people that went to church with, they was doing a lot of crazy stuff. Yeah. And it was because you didn't teach them about the beautiful side of the freedom that you could experience. So yeah, we can get into that in a little bit. We're gonna go into commercial. I'm gonna make sure we keep this thought though, because I might forget it, but we'll be back in about 3 minutes. Nope. There it is. Hey, y'all, we are back. This is New Black History Makers Show. I am your host, Jasmine. I am joined by Kara and Sasha. We are talking about church hurt. We've been hurt in church, cool. But then, what's next? And we were kind of getting into this fear versus freedom conversation before we went to break. And just kind of detailing that. I know we're sharing a little bit offline. Did you want to touch on that a little bit? Or
Absolutely. I think that you all made an excellent point saying that the church sort of instills fear in people and they don't talk enough about why we shouldn't do things that they say we shouldn't. And I think that's where the bulk of my hurt comes from, because it was always like these Bible thumping people like telling me what I should and should not be doing. And it didn't make any sense to me, because I'm like, my mind isn't even over there. But for whatever reason, you think that that's where my mind is. I was very sheltered growing up, so I didn't know much about anything. I learned life when I went away to school. And there was no one to Bible thump me. It was just like, I'm out here and I'm living, and I wasn't wilding out, but it was just like, there was that anxiety that was there. And, I have to dress a certain way. Like, it was to the point where like, we could go to a party, an event, like a campus, like a university party, and I would have on like a blazer.
Bible study ready.
My blazer and
no shoulders out.
And no shoulders out. And I for a long time, whenever I had to get comfortable wearing certain clothes, like I would never be comfortable wearing something like this.
Yeah, same.
Like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was really hard. Even 10 years ago, 7 years ago, like I used to think yesterday, yeah, like. I just got to a point maybe in the last 4 years where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna live. Like, I look great, and this is what I want to do. And now that like I'm back in church and I'm back like in ministry, I know how to temper it, but I'm learning the fine line where like I don't have to show up a certain way or look a certain way for God to be in me, for him to exist and speak through me. And that's what I want to talk on. That's what I think that it's important that we talking about the abundant side and the peace that you get with your
the
living.
freedom,
the
liberty,
freedom, the liberty, because you walk around when you're really good with God, you walk around and you know he's with you. You know he's got your back. No matter what I have on, like no matter what I'm driving, no matter where I'm living, God is very much so with me and taking or finding strength in that. As opposed to like, I'm gonna do this way so God can work this out for me. This like he's not transactional like that.
No, that's good. He's really not. And I think that was something growing up too, where I went through, or I just lived life thinking, oh, this didn't happen because I didn't do this and God is upset with me. And I had to undo that. I mean, and that was like, I don't even remember not thinking that as a child. So that was early. So I'm like, that is crazy to be 5, 6, and 7 and something not happening and nobody being able to say like, well, that just isn't what God wanted for you. But me understanding that, God must not be happy with me
because of punishment.
I didn't get what I wanted or whatever. So now I'm like overly trying to please God or whatever, and then I fall short, and then there's this extreme sense of guilt, and it's like then I get older and they're like there's nothing more or less that you can do that can pull or bring God's love closer or further away from you or whatever. Like he's not going to love you more or less because of your actions. And that was something that I had to talk about it in therapy too. Like my whole life was based upon, God must be upset with me, or I got this because he's happy for me. And then now moving in a space where it's like, no, maybe he didn't give it to me because there's some form of protection, right? So now my mental is different around when things don't happen. I'm not like sad. It's just, no, that wasn't in the will. That wasn't what he wanted. But growing up, that's tough to have that mindset as a young person.
Yeah, it leads to a lot. It leads to depression, a lot of disappointment because you're not
or
you
being
don't
angry at God.
Yeah,
like that. And I never got there. That was something that me and God are like this. We've been, I never was mad at him. I never got to that point. But it was just like, yo, homie, all right, you didn't want to give me that. Cool. Like, I'm a little down about that. You know?
What I do? What could I do more?
How can I be different? But now it's just, like I understand that it's not tied to my works. You know, I understand that it's not tied to our works. Like that's not the claim. That's not what he said.
And that's one thing the Black church can do more is teach his love,
right,
and how it really covers all.
Yeah.
Because if you understand his love and you can concentrate more on that, then if I don't do this, you build a relationship and you want to please him more, and then you're able to communicate, and it grows your relationship, opposed from you trying to be this super servant and feeling like I can never do enough or be enough because it's not working the way I want it to.
Yeah, that's good too, because it'll just have you in a bind, you know. And it's interesting too. I know people will be shocked that I said this, but I went to school at Concordia. Concordia is a white Lutheran school, and I loved sitting in my theology courses. You had to take theology courses because it was a Lutheran school. But me being there with the backing that I had from the church, of all these scriptures and all these stories and everything, and me being there, and then hearing these white men speak about grace and being justified, you know, by grace, and I was like, I don't know what Bible y'all got that from. That sounds good. But
what book did you get that one out of?
Right.
Bible.
Right. But I was like, no one has the justified by grace. Like that was something where like that was on every syllabus. That was something where they were like, before we get into any means of the book or any type of curriculum, you must understand this, and this is our claim, and this is our faith. And that was a game changer for me. And I was like, I'm gonna say it. The white people, they may not get a lot right, but they get that right.
They get love right.
They get the
God's
grace
love
right. Yeah. And I appreciated that going to that school. I said, if he sent me to the school for nothing else, he sent me to this school to understand grace better. And they taught it very well. And I think with the sanctification that we learn in the Church of God in Christ, and with grace, and then you mix a little bit of freedom in there, and some love, I think we have a winning combination, and we will be able to get people to come to God. But that's where I learned it. That was a game changer for me, going to Concordia and sitting under those ministers and them being like, and one prioritizing it, because I mean, I feel like they mentioned it every single class. They mentioned grace. We're justified by grace. That was something that was on all of our tests. Like, you could not get out of that school without knowing that grace was sufficient for you. And, you know, it's something that really just changed my perspective on God, you know? So I think that's another aspect of like, how do we move forward? That's let's preach on grace, and not grace that just, oh, you can do whatever you want to do. But like you said, if you have a relationship with somebody, and I think that's another piece of the conversation, when you're in a relationship with someone, you don't want to violate them in a way. You want to honor them, right? So that's another thing too. Like, yes, you are covered, but the closer that you get to God, the more you'll want to live a certain life. And then you realize that the life that he wanted you to live is the better life anyway.
10 times better than what you were doing.
It's peaceful, it's happy, it's joyful,
it's
prosperous.
Heavy on that peace.
Right.
Heavy on that contentment.
Push P.
Yeah, push your P. We over here pushing.
Heavy on that balance.
Right.
Heavy on that, just like when I had someone, it was actually a pastor that recently told me, he was like, I said, he said, how are you feeling today? I said, I'm at peace. And he was like, okay, you're always by yourself. I'm like, yeah, like, I'm like, it's peaceful here. Like, I love it here. And like, it's like, he was not to like, maybe he was like, that's not normal. Like, being by yourself, like, and just being so, like, it's like, that's very abnormal. And I was like, why is that abnormal to you? Like, that should be very normal.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was kind of interesting.
People don't know peace.
People don't know peace. And I also like in a time of social media and always showing what you're doing and who you're with, I think people find it very interesting or very weird, maybe a little bit, to be at peace by yourself. Or just
sometimes peace looks like boredom to people that are used to living in chaos. Okay, like, my personality is like so colorful. Like, I be having fun. I have friends. I go out. like it's very much so a peaceful life. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not out here looking over my shoulder or worried about. I ain't worried about nothing.
Used to chaos.
Okay.
Oh,
Chaotic
Lord.
lives. I rebuke it.
Right. Yeah, and it's a and we had a conversation, and I mentioned it on the show before, and people give me like a weird look, but I'm like, people that are always just happy, or even people that are always sad, I don't understand it, because I'm like, happiness, sadness, anger, they come and go, and I feel like anger and sadness, that would mean that you're not happy in that moment, but you can always be at peace. Mm-hmm. You can be angry, you can be like upset with somebody, but you can always be at peace. So I'm like, people that just walk around just, you happy every time that I see you, like, and not that you have to be down, but you can be kind of mellow, like sometimes it's just, I woke up and I'm just a little mellow today. Right. But I question it, and then I think also I mentioned to Sasha, like offline, where you'll get people who are like, oh, they'll post some, sentimental or heartfelt posts, and it's like, yeah, I've been going through depression for like the past 3 months. It's like every time I saw you, you had a smile on your face. Like,
that's the mental health aspect.
Yeah, and it's like like we should no longer be trying to put a face up. But if you're searching for peace, something could happen to me today, right? That's like crazy or whatever. But I'm gonna still be at peace. Like even when I was going through like the stuff with the arthritis, being on chemotherapy, I was still at peace. So that's why like depression didn't seep in. When they diagnosed me, they were like, you need to be mindful of depression. They told me that at 22. Was like, you need to be mindful of depression because your life is going to change. I went through 3 years of dealing with that, but I learned to be at peace with myself, be in peace during the pain. So I'm like, I wasn't always happy walking around limping. So that's why I'm like, I know people just be putting on these smiles, and I'm like, I get it,
but you also, like, if we relate this back to the church, that's a lot of that fake it till I make it.
Jesus gonna fix it.
Yeah,
Jesus is a Band-Aid.
They be saying that?
Jesus is a Band-Aid.
Right, I never heard
Jesus is a Band-Aid.
Jesus is a band.
No, that's me. People will go like, one thing I hate like about like mental health and about being a member of a church, being a Christian, is like, growing up, there was no space to talk about feelings or mental health.
Right,
it was just like Jesus was a Band-Aid to put over everything instead of getting to the root. So it probably did sound funny, but like,
I was
like,
Jesus
stop using Jesus as a Band-Aid.
He's a healer. He's a deliverer. He is all of that.
He's not a little strip though.
He's not.
He's the surgeon. That's going to fix the whole thing. He's the doctor that's going to provide medicine to get rid of the root of the issue.
And sometimes you got to go the next step, right? You do need the therapist. You do need counseling. You do need the physical side of that aspect, and sometimes you just needed to get a new perspective, because you were taught wrong.
That's true.
A lot of us were taught incorrectly, not intentionally, but they did what they could with what they knew.
Right.
So we were taught wrong, and if we keep teaching that, we're gonna keep repeating the same thing, and we ain't gonna have a church, or we're gonna have a dead church, or just a broken church. So for those that seek out, yes, God is a healer. I actually went through deliverance to where it changed me completely. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I went and I was like, yo, I'm Kojic. I don't know about this. Right. And I also didn't know, you hear people say I went to the altar and I left and I was changed, right? And you look and you go to the altar and you leave and you had an experience, but where you really changed. Yeah. And after deliverance, I can honestly say there were things that I no longer felt, think about, feel like his power is real. So to get people to that point of understanding that I see what you're going through, but there's real deliverance. There's real healing. And in between that, you might need some therapy. That's okay. You might need some, I did therapy for 3 years. It's needed, especially if you have grown up in an atmosphere like we've grown up in, and you still want to stay and participate and worship and not feel bound and not have negative thoughts towards the church or your God, and actually experience the real power and his actual love, and not just go through the motions of it, right? I think a lot of people just go through the motions. Yeah. From young to old, we go, we celebrate, we leave, but there's no change. We can have experience. We go to a church where our organists get going. Oh, church about to go up. You hear me?
Yes.
But
I mean, we grew up in that.
Yes. Yeah. But we've also have a ministry that, like, I went to therapy because my pastor recommended me to go. I was in counseling with him, and he said, you know what? He's a doctor. He was like, I think you're a little bit above my pay grade. You need to go to somebody who specializes in that.
Yeah.
So to find leaders that are willing to give you resources outside of them, like you have to really find a place. You just go into a church ain't gonna do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Just like you just looking for a school. When you look for a school, you look for a specific school based off of what you're studying. Right. So you need to go to a specific church and look for somebody who's teaching, who's feeding, who's giving you the real word, who's pushing it, and
Push a P.
Thankfully for us, we push P over there. Mount Sinai is a life changer, and I was able to stay kojic. That was the thing.
What do y'all mean when y'all say pushing P?
Well,
we just pushing peace.
Peace.
Well,
Peace. I thought you said push P. I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on.
Well, that was that thing on social media.
Yeah, it was a song or something.
Future or something.
Yeah.
Or that was the social media.
Pushing peace.
Yeah, we're pushing peace. Well, I was
Peace.
saying pushing P, but
Pushing peace. Because I don't know what the other P stood for.
I like trap music, so it's a completely different meaning.
Right.
Bro.
But yeah, I push that narrative of you needing to find a church that works for you, because I'm like, a lot of people, I went to this church and they're not doing it. And I'm like, well, why would I keep getting into a car that don't work, that it doesn't work for me, or I need to go to Pomona, or I know that I need to drive far and it's not taking me there. It stops every single time I get on the 110. Like, why would I keep getting in the car thinking that it's going to take me to Pomona?
People look at me crazy when I start to go to church in Pomona.
People do. They be like, okay.
And I hit them with Bethany's quote every time. A church alive is worth the drive. And it changes things.
She is so sweet. She is so sweet. Hi, First Lady Bethany.
Bethany is the daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
First Lady is
First Lady Roan. First Lady Elizabeth Roan.
They're both so sweet.
First Lady Roni. I knew
Roan.
Roan.
Roan. RHONE.
Not Roni. Roan. Hi, Pastor and First Lady Roan.
They're watching.
I'm so happy that you all are on here watching today, and that I have an opportunity to say hello.
Shout out to Mount Sinai.
You're awesome. Awesome people.
Yeah, they're very sweet.
They're the best.
We love them.
Yeah.
They're really sweet. And shout out to Beth
and Carl, Pastor Carl. See y'all tonight.
Right. And that's the thing too, even like tonight. I mean, in real time we're going, bowling with our young adult ministry. So finding a place where there are things that you can, do, or things that you can interact with, people that you can, do life with. Because I think a few years ago, I mean, pre-COVID, I don't know that I had the support, like the church support that I had, or the community, I'll say, around my age group. It was just kind of like whatever. I was going to, I think, like my uncle's church, and I was just there, doing whatever. I knew what I needed, right? But I knew that I needed something that looked like where I'm at now. But I didn't have that, but I knew I was like, I have to leave. I have to get away from the family, whatever. And I eventually did. So now being at Mount Sinai for 2 years, like, okay, now I'm in a space where it's like, okay, boom, I have community, even outside of Mount Sinai, there's community there where we're able to talk about faith, and I'm able to discuss things with people where it makes sense to them. And it's not like, girl, you don't have to do that, or you don't have to do that. Like, what? But it's good to have that community, and it's good to have something wholesome to do on a Friday night, with some wholesome people. It's good, but that's because we found a place that is beneficial to who we are, and then also, I guess we can get into that too. I didn't put this in my notes, but being businesswomen in the church, were somebody I was talking to about you. It was the AIM convention, and them talking about
so you just throwing it out there. Okay.
Them talking about successful women being under men in the church that may not have the same
qualifications or education as them, and how you're supposed to submit. And that's an issue that's been an issue, where women have been downplayed their talents, their gifts, their businesses, and you have to come in and sit under a man that's less educated, knows less if it's in the business, if it's in the department, whatever it is, but you have to submit because he's the lead, because he's a he. He's a he. And at AIM they talked, because I watched AIM, and they talked about how it needs to change. Shout out to the supervisor, Barbara McCool Lewis. She was on there, and she was like, it needs to change. But how do we go about that, and even how do we do that and not lose the men?
And for those of y'all who don't know, AIM is auxiliaries in ministry. And
thanks for giving that context. Because
so basically, different, like, I mean, not organizations, but the different ministries in the church, they will come together and
it's like a leadership
have
conference.
a conference. So there was a big conference that's national that happened for the Kojic Church, and this is where this conversation.
Yeah, they had a panel, and the question came up about women who are business owners, entrepreneurs, you know, who have made it to a certain level coming into the church that want to serve. How do you expect us to sit and serve under somebody who's not as qualified, who's less educated?
Which is real.
I mean, you know, that's a difficult, even as being businesswomen in the church, period, and getting respect or business or getting even just looked at, you know, it's a little different.
Yeah.
My experience as a woman in church is very different from my experience as a little girl in church. And being a businesswoman, like, I had to go to a place where, okay, is this person, first of all, who do I know that knows them? When I was seeking out my church, I found a number of the young preachers in my network that said, hey, this is a good place that you can go. And it's like good ground. So I went, and my pastor is Pastor Joe Robinson of Resurrection Church. I also go to my dad's church, Pastor Gates, but like, you know, that's where I go to be spiritually fed. And my pastor is educated, like, and I enjoy his authenticity. Like, he might say some things, I'm just like, whoa, hold on, like, that caught me off guard. Like, but it's authentic, and I can always count on him being himself, which is important to me.
Yeah.
And then being able to come to church as my full self. Like, I don't have to water myself down. That was so important to me, because don't expect me to be coming to your church, but you think that you can tell me what I need to be doing outside. Like, no, that's not the way you're going to get to me. You're not going to get to me that way. Like, I'm going to go out on Saturday, and I'm going to be here on Sunday. And I wish someone would say something. Okay. No, but I'll be there at 7:45 a.m. for the media ministry. I will be there this Sunday at work. So I'm like, I just put me to use and just accept what I bring to the table. Like, don't try to change me. Don't try. This is a Peter spirit. We're trying to get it under control. We're trying to mellow out, but I'm growing, I'm maturing. Just let me be me.
I think also with that, like, as people come into ministry and get ministered to and discipled and mentored, it brings about a natural change. You naturally start changing. You naturally start abiding in the word and wanting to live a certain way and move a certain way, right? So, like the pants thing or the makeup thing, like, if you bring them in and love on them, eventually they're going to do what the word says. They might not do what you say, but they're going to do what the word says.
Right. And you know, even with me, and it's crazy because I remember growing up, I hated skirts, but I wore them so much because that was our church. It was like you would not catch me outside of a Kojic event with a skirt on. Like, I just hated them. And I remember somebody one day, like, I was working in a store. This was like right out of college or something. I'm right out of high school. And they were like, yeah, we're thinking about putting these jean skirts. I was like, don't nobody want to wear those. She was like, these are cute. I was like, no. And I realized in that moment, like, wow, I have this angst against skirts because of the church, because they forced us to wear them. However, now that I'm, you know, where I'm at in my faith or whatever, it's a little bit of PTSD, but I don't wear a little bit. Well, I don't wear pants in church.
Which
and
is
that's
okay.
something, right? And it's just something it's more so of a decision that I've made for myself, and then also just honoring whatever. Like, I'll still speak to it, like, you know, I did last episode and speaking to how I feel about the way that they went about it, but it's also something that I still like choose to honor, you know, in the way that they've taught us. But it's definitely nothing when I'm looking, you know, at somebody. It's like, okay, whatever, you know, you wear pants, that's cool, or whatever. Right? Yeah, Sasha wears pants to church. I don't have that. I don't have that on me. But it's literally just a difference of a decision. Like, that's literally all that it is. And I don't look at her like, oh, Sasha, whatever. I'm just like, Sasha's gonna come in here with her pants on. I'm not. But might come in with, well, I don't come in with Crocs no more, but I would, and that was for another reason. But yeah, it's just I'll come in comfortable, but you know, I choose to abide by that because
of this convention. I'm abiding.
Okay.
See, I ain't going to no convention.
You're not going to convention?
I'm done with
no convention.
I'm finished with convention.
All conventions.
Conventions, I'm done.
We're going on a convention tour next year.
want to go to not another convention.
No, you gotta. Really? Okay. So then we have a break, but I'm gonna write this down. We're gonna bring it up because I want to talk about. I guess, and we're not gonna go into it before the break, but the ways that we are affecting our church or having conversation. We had a conversation with our leader. I think we have conversations with our leaders on what we would like to see or just the gauge of
the fact that we're able to do that is just dope. Period. From our pastor to our first lady to our youth pastor, and his first lady. I never called Beth his first lady. That's a little weird.
Beth, you're a first lady.
Yeah, first lady Beth.
Lady Bethy.
But we're able to really talk, and then like we're talking here, and tell them the issues we've had, the spaces we see that needs to be filled. And they listen, they do their best to meet us, or to see what we can do to bridge that gap. So,
and there's been a lot of things that I have fought people on, not fought them on, but I've said I'm going to stick to my guns on, that going to Mount Sinai and listening to mainly Beth and Bishop, because they get real deep into stuff. They go hard. I've heard them say some things, and I've literally changed my mind. And you all know, I've changed my mind about a lot of stuff. Okay, but I've literally been like, you know what, that is a good answer, or that is a good reason for me to refrain from X, Y, and Z. Because I feel like I'm strong in my faith and I'm not wavering, so that if I do exist in this space, it's fine. Or if I do participate in this, it's fine. But there are some things that they've said and I've been like, okay. And that's when I knew I can be here, because if my leadership can challenge me to change what I'm doing, oh, that's the place to be, because I'm not changing nothing. I mean, God is working on me. We're going to leave that at that.
That's fair. That's fair.
But we're going to go to break. But yeah, I want to get into like what we can do or how we're interacting with the ministries that we're a part of when we get back. But we'll be right back in 3 minutes.
Okay.
Must advise against taking anything said on this program too seriously. Viewer discretion is advised.
What's up, friends? It's I and Friends. We're here at the Podcast Pit LA. It was so fun. We came to rep the IE. I think we did a pretty good job. So shout out to the Podcast Pit for having us. Shout out to TGN. You guys should definitely check them out. You should check me out, Saul V. Gomez.
Y'all can find me at I Know Caesar on IG. You can find me at airbear_IE on IG.
And you guys can find the podcast at I and Friends on every social media network except for OnlyFans. That's coming soon. So stay tuned. So follow us and follow TGN Podcast Pit. Have a good day, guys.
Hey there, business owners. Don't miss our limited time offer. Advertise on the Good News Radio as low as $2 per commercial slot. That's right. Promote your business up to 4 times a day, every day for a month on live radio. If you're interested, email us at contact@tgnradio.com.
Hey y'all, we are back. This is the New Black History Makers Show. I am your host, Jasmine Gates, and we are at the Good News Network. If you are listening on the app at some point in time during the week, we are live every Friday at 3:30. So please come back and watch us. Also follow us on Instagram at New Black History Makers. And you can shop with us, newblackhistorymakers.com. We're in the Fox Hills Mall at Uplift Us Marketplace, and then at Unloved LA on Melrose. So shop with us, go get some merch. We got some dope merch out, and also come back and listen to the show. But I'm not by myself. Clearly, I'm here with Sasha and Kara. We're having a really good conversation about the church, about our own personal experiences, about being women, businesswomen that are going to church. We kind of didn't finish that conversation, but I essentially think we are all in spaces where we feel like we can submit to our leadership, right? Where there isn't this issue of like he ain't there, but I guess there are women there, and I guess my response to that would be go to a different church. I mean, maybe the older people would say you gotta
Submit.
Yeah, what she say? You gotta be holy.
Yeah.
I don't know the correlation.
Well, she was long. Yeah, she said she agrees.
But she's
with
also. I mean, they gonna get on me.
They are.
I'm sorry.
We love Mother Lewis. She in her 80s.
Oh, this is a person.
Yes. And her comment was like, yeah, just pretty much uphold the standard of holiness. Uphold the standard of holiness.
So I feel like the older saints would say, like, oh, you still need to figure out a way to submit, right? But also, how can you lead me? I don't know. If you ain't been where I'm trying to go.
Well, that's never been a question. I don't feel that's been a question on the table for leadership of a pastor or a leader that's not equipped or well equipped, right? If you have somebody in your church that has education or this, that, and the other, maybe went to seminary, theology school, and they come in and they want to be used or you don't use them, but they're like, not only am I usable, I'm a little more knowledgeable.
I got a little more of something else
than you. I mean, of course, the anointing, we have to consider the anointing. Of course, we have to, all those things, but how do you sit in that space? Do you sit in that space?
Right. See, bring me out to conventions because we need to talk. Because I'm like, what do you do if you ain't been where I'm trying to go? Now, not in a very literal sense,
not in the same field, but in life.
But like even with our bishop, right? Like he's a doctor.
Yes, he is.
And like is doing things like
we can go to him for financial advice. We can go to him for career advice. We can go to him for marriage. It's same with his wife. She's an educated woman. We can go to them for life in all aspects of knowledge or just of guidance, and we can get it. And then they are Bible based. They're well studied and anointed. So it's like, if you don't have that, how are you navigating through life with leaders? Are you just going to church and paying time?
I go to church and I listen and I take notes and I'm looking for spiritual leadership.
Right.
That's about it.
Well, they're still getting it if they're able to provide it. But what if that individual is unable to provide it? Because I've sat under, let me be careful. I've sat under leadership that was educated but couldn't pay bills.
Wow.
So it affected how I viewed the church because it affected our service, right? Because offering was always a thing. And then I lived with them. So I knew other things going on as well. And it put me in a position of, if I really want to live this thing, do I stay here? Do I go? What do I do? And it caused me to go in a whole nother route. So it's like, do you stay? Do you go?
I mean, I think you
go.
I mean, talk to God about it. Talk to him about it. And,
talk to the Lord?
Yeah, but I think I needed to be in a place where I knew that I could grow there, where I saw people that, because growing up in the church that I grew up in, it was a lot of struggle. And I think you mention it often, like not wanting to be that big fish in a small pond.
Yeah, I was just about to get into that.
And I didn't, and I would ask my dad, like, why is it always because that's back when we had testimony service, that a check came in the mail and that's how you was able to pay your gas or for gas or for food. Like, it was always that you needed some type of random blessing out the sky for you to be able to live in the normal means. And I was just like, I didn't like that. And my dad would just be like, that's just their life, And I'm like, okay, but I don't want that for my life. So I think being in the space that we're in, like, even when I look around, like at Mount Sinai, there's a lot of people that I can look around at that are doing things and I'm like, oh, I like that. Or their marriages are thriving. I like that. Whether it be all their kids are by, them two, or they're blended, whatever, but you can see that there. And that's a space where I'm like, okay, I'm not this big fish in a small pond, right? Like, and I feel like I'm this younger person that they pour into, right? And that's what I want to feel like. I don't want to feel like I'm the big dog. Like I'm not. I mean, I
I'm about to say Jazz.
But where I'm being fed, right? I don't want, because how can you feed me if you feel like I'm a big dog,
or if you feel threatened?
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes you can be too big for an environment.
Yeah,
outgrow the environment. Like the church I go to now, I need everybody doing something. Everybody, like, I never know who I'm going to see in there. And I'm not there to see people necessarily. Yeah. But I do like that, okay, you have a lot going on. I don't like being a big fish in a small pond. That's how you stay that size. I want to continue to grow, get larger, learn as much as I can. And if this is where the leadership is and they're feeding me in that way, I just need the spiritual help, really. Like everything else, like my parents help me with. My parents do help me with, but it's like,
and even with that, like, there's no quote unquote like help that I would say that they give. I mean, outside of like support, but I think like you said, the spiritual aspect, because once we've already realized that we are like Bible believers, we believe in Jesus, whatever, but you're led spiritually through your businesses or whatever. Like a lot of the stuff that I do, I'm like, these are God assignments that he's given me. So I need to be connected spiritually to be able to run New Black History Makers. So it's like, if you are not in a place where you can guide me or you can give me, instruction or, help me tie in business stuff with my, spiritual life or whatever, then I may not need to sit, under you. But I'm very much so like guided by God in the work that I do. So it's like, if I'm gonna sit here, it has to line up, or I have to be receiving, basically. And pastors don't have to speak on the business side. They can speak solely on Bible stuff, being a good steward or, whatever. They can speak on the Bible stuff and you can apply it to your life. However, but I think it's just one of those things, being mindful of like, check, if you ain't feeling right at your church and you feel like you ain't being fed, maybe it's time to go somewhere else. Yeah. Or talk to your leader about it. Like, I don't feel challenged here. Don't tell, okay. But talk, I think having conversations, that's one thing I'm big on, is having the conversations. But
and I think we have tough conversations with our leaders.
Yeah.
And they are open to them and they're honest with us, and it brings a lot of clarity and it offers a lot of peace, right? If I'm challenged by something or possibly someone, and I'm able to sit down and get a better understanding, because anytime we sit down with them, it points us right back to God. It gives us clarity on the natural side, but it points us right back to God. And I'm able to sit down and be a student of that. Like, my first lady has characteristics that I need, not necessarily that I want. Yes, I want them, but I need them. So to sit back and be able to study her and who she is and how she goes about this. Same thing with my pastor and other leaders. Even like Jazz has taught me stuff. We hang out all the time. So it's like, to be able to be around people that are Bible believers and I can be a student, even when I don't know I'm being a student, it's like, that is so important. I've learned so much. And how I do my business, how I treat people, how I move just during the day with people. I'm a realtor, so I do open houses. I don't do open houses on Sunday no more. I used to do brunches. I don't do that no more, because if I'm not with family, I'm at church.
It's the conviction.
It's not the conviction. It's the longing, because I'm a student. I want to be there. I want to be fed. I need to be there. I want to be around him. It has built a community that's like family.
Wow.
Like, I have like tonight, it's Friday night. We ain't got to go to West Covina to go bowling. But we want to. Yeah. Like, I'm excited to see the young people in my youth department. It's going to be fun. If nothing else, it's going to be fun. Right. And it's cool to see the people. And it's nice to sit with people that are like-minded, that are Bible believers, that we can have good, clean fun with.
Right.
And even have these conversations with at the same time. Because a lot of times it goes into these conversations that need to be had. Yeah. So it gives me a different family, a different community outside of my work, outside of my family. You know, it's a different level of things that I didn't even know that I needed, that is opening so many doors in me, that's pouring into spaces that I didn't know that needed to be filled.
And I think the piece about the conviction, I think you get convicted in certain spaces, right? Because there's it matters where your heart is, because some people do get the conviction of like, oh, I need to be at church, or I wasn't at church because it was like, well, what were you doing? You know, and I think even with me, I stopped vending because last year I was vending like crazy, and I stopped vending this year as much. But then even last year, towards the end of the year, I stopped vending on Sundays. It was more of like I was irritated not being able to go to church because I enjoyed being there, you know, but my heart wasn't in a space of not wanting to be at church. So I think the conviction comes when your heart is wrong, you know, but the desire to be there, because it wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to church and I'm about to just go turn up. I was working, I was making money, and, you know, I work for myself. So that, I mean, any day matters, you know, like any day that I can put money back into myself or my business, that matters. So it was literally, I think that's the difference. You're convicted when your heart is wrong. My heart was in the right place. And then I had to make a decision and be more trusting of God. Like, if you can give, you know, your Sundays, like, or if you can trust God, you know, with your business, you don't have to work Sundays. Like, you can have Sundays, you know, off and do whatever. So I think that, you know, is essentially where it is. And that goes into that fear and freedom thing.
And then I think we started
the fear and freedom thing. I think I didn't think of, I never even registered that conviction comes from fear. I didn't register that until you just broke that down to me.
And like for us, we had a conversation about, Jasmine and I will go to a service during the week. We go to a revival. You hear me? We be churching. Right. But on Sundays for us, we had a conversation of, I heard somebody explaining to, like, it's my celebration day. I made it through the week. I came to church to celebrate that he brought me through the week. Yeah. And to me, like, that was big. Like, from Monday to Saturday, outside of real estate, because real estate is crazy, and y'all know the market's crazy right now, but just life and how life happens, friends, family, money, situations, the world, the economy, just life. Yeah. And for him to provide and keep and maintain and sustain and grow me for 6 days, that 7th day, I'm gonna rest and I'm gonna give it to you. So Sundays, if I ride with her, girl, we at church from 8 to 8. Wow. And including Sunday school in there and church dinner at the bottom. But it's a pleasure. It's an excitement. Like, I'm excited for Sundays. So I had to also change how I view church and change my perspective of Sundays. Like, because for a while I would go to church. I was going to a mega church. Girl, get there early in the morning, leave. I'm at brunch by 1.
That's my style. That's my pastor literally said,
and I'll get a second one by the evening.
We're gonna get out of here so y'all can go to brunch. We'll be out of here by 11:30 so y'all can go to brunch. You don't have to leave before the benediction. And I'll be like, all right, pastor.
But that was me. And I mean, if that's what, fine, you know, that's okay. But it got to the point where I when I would leave, I felt like I was missing out.
On what?
On fellowship, on just growing with people, because we sit down at lunch after church and we have conversation. And these conversations and these conversations, I mean, it's a variety of people. Usually my bishop and first lady's there, our youth leaders are there, half the congregation is there. Not half, but you know,
but
a lot
it's
of
people
us.
And
we talk and we fellowship and we laugh. And we're building relationship, we're building family, we're building community. So we're doing our best to promote our church, to build our church for whatever our bishop's vision is, because we're gonna follow him as he follows Christ. But Sunday is our celebration day. Like, we made it, and to come back and give all that I can give with my physical is why I'm here, and my monies, but my voice, my arms, you know, to worship. And that's because to some that's a sacrifice, but to me, it's a celebration.
Yeah. And it evolved. So it was something where I was like, oh, I'm not going to work on Sundays anymore, whatever. Cool. And now it's just like, it's not, you know, the way that he's just orchestrated my schedule and things that I have set up is just like, okay, I don't even need to think about working on Sundays, you know? So it was just something for me where I made the decision more so of trusting God and being like, oh, I don't need to penny pinch, or I don't need to overwork myself to feel like I'm being successful.
And I have to realize he is my provider, right? Yeah. He's I run my own business. So Without him, my marketing, my prospecting, it's nothing. Right. So if I trust him and I believe him that he is my provider, he gonna provide.
God can do more with your rest than he can with your work, overworking.
So it's a thing. And I'm like, I mean, I tell people all the time, like, I think really getting into a space where you really trust God and you're trusting God with what it is that you're doing in your life. And I think we talked about it too, just being like, all right, cool, do what you need to do, God. But, I can say that it hasn't been a problem for me. Like I don't work on Sundays. I don't want you to invite me anywhere on Sundays. I'm like, no, do not invite me anywhere. I do not want my brand to be like, no, I am at church because I enjoy being there. And she said it, I am at 8:00 service. And 11:00 service.
And Sunday school.
Yes. I enjoy being at my church because I feel like that's I enjoy being there and I want to serve. I serve there. So we don't live it up on Sundays.
And our Sunday school class go up.
Yeah, we have
a great Sunday school class.
Not there yet. Probably never going back.
You gotta go to Sunday. I think, but
you know what? I said that. My grandma was a Sunday school teacher. Her best friend was our Sunday school superintendent. So I was like, I ain't never ever going back. And when I realized I have so much to learn, and we have a Sunday school teacher. Shout out to Sister Renee. She just wrote a book too. She's absolutely amazing. But she's transparent with us. Like when I say she's transparent, she get on the line and tell us exactly how she's feeling, and she'll tell us, I'm gonna pray about that. I need the Lord to work on that. And it helps us be transparent, and it helps us be human and spiritual. We're not perfect,
and it lets you know that you're not. Like I think sometimes we think that our negative thoughts are like just far from God.
Mm-hmm.
Like we think that, when we have a negative thought or when we're dealing with negative feelings that, God is nowhere in that. And it's like, no, he sees that and he acknowledges that. So when we hear some of these older, women or some of the women that are in leadership say, I felt this way, or I dealt with this and I had to, figure out a way around it. It makes me feel like, okay, so this is normal, or I'm not wrong. Because growing up, it was something like, like you said, we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about emotions. So you just thought like, these women are just, they don't cry. They don't do anything. They just sit there. They look pretty. They wear their hats.
And they believe in
God.
And
that's it. Yeah. But it's like, I think it's important because in our Sunday school, it's also a women's only class and it's a certain age group. So we talk about more specific things. And I think that's why it's like, a little more beneficial because it's like, okay, we're getting preaching, but then you're also getting this piece where it's like, okay, this is for you as this essentially a Black woman in, going, I don't know what the age group is, but, in womanhood. And I think that's important, whether you're getting it in a non-church space or in a church space. I think you need some type of like accountability or some type of like mentoring. I think that's necessary. It doesn't always happen in the most positive way for people, and I understand that. But if you can find it, I think it's something worth like tapping into and being a part of and sitting under. But yeah, I feel like we always repping for Mount Sinai. Shout out to Mount Sinai and Pomona. But yeah, that's dope. But that's what I wanted to get into is like, how are we kind of operating in not necessarily in the ministries, but with our faith? What are we like doing now? Or is that something that we see ourselves in ministry or moving in that direction? I think even the conversations that we have like with our leaders and stuff, I know our dads are in ministry. So that's something I know I'm often talking to my parents about. Like me and my dad just had a conversation about mental health. So that was like an interesting conversation because he was like, well, if you love God, then you shouldn't be like, your mental should be good. And I'm like, well, that we both know crazy people that love God.
I was a little concerned just now.
Right, but I heard him kind of like, well, yeah, but God can hear them, like, but he wasn't, and that's why I'm always like, when I hear preachers that have adult children say things, I always wonder, because I feel like there's a responsibility that we have as the children of ministers sometimes, or even just sitting in ministry, to bring certain things to our parents. right? And to keep things either relevant or to let them know, like, hey, I didn't know about this. And the mental health thing is definitely there. So my dad feeling that, I'm like, it is my responsibility to go and say, like, yes, Dad, you can love God, but you can still be troubled in your mind. You can still have an issue in your mind or a mental illness and still love God. And I mentioned to him, if your arm is broke, we can't just say, oh, go on the altar and your arm is going to be, I mean, God can do it.
Jesus as a Band-Aid.
Right. But
Jesus a Band-Aid.
you should go get a cast. It's wise for you to tell them to go get a cast so that their arm does not get worse. And it's the same thing with your mind. And we don't look at our mind as a physical thing. So it's hard for people to grasp that. But that was a real conversation that I had with my dad. And he was just, I could hear in his voice, he was just like, well,
the wheels got turned.
God can help. Yes, God can help them. But what if God's way of helping them is through therapy or is through getting a resource so that their mind can be regulated? Oftentimes, I think, and you don't want to speak and make it seem as if you're talking or saying that the power of God is not able to help them. And it's like, yes, but sometimes he already put things in place so that you can be healed in that area, you know, like therapy or whatever. So it's an interesting thing. But I do think that there's work, especially for our generation when it comes to the church.
Well, that's why these conversations are so important. And I've seen, and I'm really grateful, a lot of these conversations happening on different platforms in our churches and other churches, trying to bridge the gap and bring people back. Because even aside from people leaving denominations, going to other denominations, people are just walking away from the church, walking away from God.
Yeah.
And that's scary. That's an issue, right? So to have these conversations, because we need it to be relevant, it needs to make sense to us. Most of us, we don't have time as business owners, as young people, just in today's world, to waste time. Yeah. And if you feel like you're doing something that's wasting time, most people are going to walk away. Yeah. So it needs to be relevant. It needs to touch more than, the pockets of the people and name it and claim it. It needs to be more than God can heal. Yeah. Show me how to pray. Show me how to study. Show me how to read. Show me how to live. We were talking because she watches, I watch Spirit of Truth. Mm-hmm. And they have a very free service, and you can watch it and want to be a part. Like
Spirit of Truth.
Spirit and Truth.
Spirit and Truth.
Mark Moore, Atlanta.
It's a church in Atlanta.
Oh, that's the guy that spoke to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. Okay.
And for him to be so young and just attracting young people, but yet very conservative and traditional in how he speaks and preaches, and yet very, very Bible based, because a lot of preachers water down the word to bring people in. And it's like, that is so important, because he speaks on more than, about shouting and hollering. And if you do this, he gonna bless you. Yeah. He speaks to your soul. He talks about leadership, accountability, being in a church, how important it is to be under covering, how important it is to have the Holy Ghost, how important it is to study. These things are so relevant, especially when we're dealing with a generation or a society that has so much depression and anxiety and panic attacks. And I've had 2 people in my life in the last 12 months that went to church, that loved the Lord, that were dealing with mental illness, that committed suicide.
Jesus.
Under 30. So it's needed and it's necessary. Yeah. We're losing people. We are. Because we're not necessary. So they feel like, we're not necessary. We're not doing things that are needed. So they feel we're not necessary.
Right.
And we have to change that, because we've all experienced church hurt. We know it's going to happen.
And mental illness.
Yeah. And mental illness.
Real, like,
it's going to happen. Yeah. But what is the solution? How do we get to the solution? We know Jesus is the answer, but what route do we take to get there?
Therapy. Have y'all seen that?
I got one.
I got that sweatshirt. It's fire.
Yeah.
Because it's real. Yeah. I needed Jesus, and I needed a whole lot of therapy.
Right.
And that therapy was to unprogram some things that I believed. I was strong on the law. Grace was nowhere in my vision. Yeah. I was a law person, and I was bound by that guilt and conviction. And I came into the knowledge of grace, and it's like, I knew it, but when you get the knowledge of it, it's different. When you understand it and you apply it and you can see it and feel it, is different. Yeah. And that is what we need. Church hurt is going to happen, y'all. It is what it is. You're going to get hurt at work. You're going to get hurt by friends. You're going to get hurt by family.
Everybody.
But when it comes to the church, we walk away and we never want to go back because of what we expected. There are expectations. Right. And as people having these conversations, we need to first acknowledge it's going to happen. And then secondly, how do we route them back? And then how do we go about helping those that are creating this hurt?
Yeah.
You know, because if we don't fix that, it's gonna keep happening.
Right.
Or have those conversations to make it at least bring to the mindset of people of let's be cautious how we treat people. Let's be graceful when we talk, because I don't know what you're going through today. So I had a conversation with somebody in my office about an older mother made a comment. And it bothered me, because I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, we know older people are going to say what they're going to say. But if you don't know what that person is going through, your little comment of the obvious of weight or what they look like or how they dress, it could widely affect them. So we need to be mindful of how this person they been. We don't know what they're going through mentally. We don't know what's going on at home. And if we're going to be godly, we need to have discernment and address their spirit and talk to their heart.
Yeah. There's a quote
to me though.
It ain't, but common sense ain't common though. We got
because you have to think of a lot of us were taught the legal way of our religion. So that's the fear. So if you're speaking to that, because oftentimes when you see somebody that's sinning, or like you see somebody fornicating, right? I mean, God, I hope you don't see nobody fornicating, but you know that they're fornicating, right? Your natural mind is like, oh, you're wrong, right? But then not speaking to the actual soul behind like the sin that they're doing. And I think that's just something that is a blanket issue in the church in general, where we often speak to what we think people are doing wrong instead of speaking to the actual soul or
I agree with
the person. Yeah. So I'm like, and I understand it, because I had to dismantle a lot of that legality myself. And even in all of the dismantling that I've done, there's still a lot of legalistic thoughts and legalistic ways that I am. But I'm like, I get it. I get, how they are holding on to these things. Because I mean, I told Sasha, like, we hold on to being Kojic. We hold on to a lot of the teachings that they taught us. And there are some things where I look at people like, you ain't right. You need to get there. And they may not be right, but I may not need to go tell them that they are not right, or I may need to have a different kind of conversation with them. So it's an uphill battle. And I think that's why it's important for us to be in these churches and in these spaces where we're able to sit with our leadership and have conversations. I mean, this is, we're going to wrap up soon, but we had a conversation with our pastor about the Roe versus Wade stuff, pro-life and pro-choice, and just had a conversation with him about his thoughts, our thoughts, what we think could happen or what we think could be beneficial for our church. But I think that's necessary, for the younger generation to sit and say, I'm interested in what you have to say, but this is also what I think would be beneficial.
And then the questions behind it, because I mean, we had questions behind it that if we are going to stand on what we believe, what about resources? Right. We can't just exit something out that has been legal that people have seen as not an issue, tell them it's an issue and not give resources, tell them they can't do this and not help. How do we help? Because in the end, we know when it comes to the Roe versus Wade and abortions, a lot of times it's because people they don't have enough resources. So, how do we speak to that? And then we went further than that. Like, let's go even before they even get pregnant. Like, let's have conversations then. Let's talk to, are we talking to the young men as hard as we're talking to the women? That part.
Well, we're not going to get into the
We're not going there, but I'm just saying this is the conversations we're able to have with our leaders.
That part.
But yeah, so that I was just bringing that up to say that was one of the more recent conversations, but we are able to have different conversations. And I think it's important for the younger generation to be present and around enough to say like, hey, I want to have a conversation about this, or I do want to pick your mind on this topic. But yeah, but we're going to wrap up. You guys, of course, are more than welcome to come back. And we can do a part 3, or we could talk about something else. But
I think we am glad. Today.
Yeah, we did. I'm glad that you guys came out. You want to share your IG and how people can follow you, or any last words?
Kara Gates Show, and look forward to that next episode.
Yes, and watch her most recent one too. On Not Judging a Book by
Not Judging Books by Their Cover.
Yeah. And then any last words or?
Thank you, Jasmine, for inviting me on your show.
Yes, of
It's been
course.
an amazing experience.
Yeah.
It's brought a lot of healing. And I think I provided a space for me to talk about things that I normally just wouldn't talk about on a platform. So yeah, thanks for the invite.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Share your Instagram, Sasha.
Sure, even though I'm not on there that often. It's the THEE Sasha PELLUM. Yeah. My only last words is find somewhere that's feeding you.
Like that.
Get mentally healthy. Find peace. Yes.
Heavy on that piece. Pushing peace.
We pushing peace.
Right. But yeah, so I'm glad that we have this. Please share this. If you share this with your pastors. Yes, share this with your pastors.
Your youth
leadership, everything. We want to bring them on. I need to bring some pastors on, get them in to talk about it. Because this is a good topic, and I think we need to start holding people accountable. But that's it. We'll be back next Friday at 3:30, having another dope conversation. But this is the Good News Network, and I'll see you guys next Friday.
Without the power of God behind everything I do, I really am completely inadequate.
I'm helping the culture. These guys are part of us as well. These are guys of our cousin. I'm helping the culture. I'm pushing the culture forward in another way.
Hey, black child, be what you can be, learn what you must learn, do what you can do, and tomorrow.
What do you do after you read?